Hi and welcome to Budget Model Railways, and today I thought I would talk about my favourite 5 N-gauge locomotives that I own. I'm starting with a blank screen because I don't want to spoil the surprise. A couple of caveats. These are my five favourite locomotives that I own. I am not saying they are the best 5 locomotives in the world. I try not to do these kind of hyperbole statements that other people use to promote their videos. And these things in any case are all personal. They're all a bit arbitrary. Remember years ago discussing music with a friend, and we both agreed how much we liked the Metallica S&M album. And when I told him my favourite 3 tracks, he was horrified because they were his least 3 favourites. So even when we could agree on one of our favourite albums, we couldn't agree on our favourite tracks. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's really no point filling the comments box with this is wrong and that's wrong, or this loco is better or that loco is better. Firstly, I probably haven't got the other locos, and this is my view of what I like in my collection and why I've got them. I do occasionally get asked as well, would I show my entire locomotive collection? And the answer to that is always no, because then I would have to face up to the problem that I've got a locomotive addiction. So I prefer not to address that issue. So let's start with number 5. So this is a Kato EF65 electric locomotive. Why is it one of my favourites? Well, firstly, Doug bought it for me for a Father's Day gift a couple of years ago. It's also a fabulous looking locomotive. I haven't added the numbers, but beyond that, look at the detail on this. And it's worth pointing out that this locomotive was under £70 new. And you can still get Kato locomotives new from people like Train Tracks and so on at under £70. Now, when you think of the price of the UK outline stuff, that's really an incredible price. And it's not like these have been done down to a budget. Just look at that detail. It runs really well. I'm not going to shunt it. A couple of the others are shunters, and I'll do a bit of shunting. This works particularly well. Directional lights, all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup. Just a fabulous loco. And for a really wonderful price. So that gets in there at number 5. It isn't any higher because I particularly like my shunting, and although it will shunt, obviously it's not really a shunting locomotive, but when I have the big layout built, this is very much going to feature on there. So there we go, number 5, Kato EF65. So number 4, and you can see this is going to be quite an eclectic bunch. This is a Kato Noab. Now, they did these in all sorts of colour schemes. I waited until these went on offer at the end, actually sort of this time last year. Quite a few places had them cheaper. And this was this colour scheme I liked the best at the cheaper prices. Now, it was still a relatively, for me, expensive locomotive, nearly £100. That is a lot for me, but I just love Nohabs. I just love the look of them. They were, as I understand it, a Europeanised American locomotive. They were pretty ubiquitous. They went everywhere. So it's just a fabulous looking locomotive. Now, being Kato, you've got wonderful directional lights. Runs very smoothly. That's actually the track. I should have cleaned the track a bit. It will shunt, and we'll have a go at that now. But it's a lovely runner and a wonderful looking locomotive at really, at what is these days, not a bad price. Now, I'm always nervous when it comes to filming locomotives shunting because they have a tendency to not shunt as soon as you press record. But this one will run nicely and slowly over points. So that will feature on some of my shunting layouts. Now, obviously, I'm quite fortunate. I tend to make these. I make freelance layouts. This isn't anywhere. It's not meant to be anywhere. It could be anywhere. It's just a little hall and a good shed and some track. And it's one of my favourite layouts. And it's one of my favourite layouts because it means I can do this and I can run my eclectic collection and nothing looks too out of place. Like wonderful directional lights on that. And that it's just such a handsome locomotive and such a good model. So that's number 4. Now, number 3, we have a Graham Farish by Bachmann to be correct, Class 14. Allegedly they're called teddy bears. I'm always a bit dubious about some of these nicknames on locomotives and military equipment and things. I'm never quite sure. When you read a lot of the railwaymen's stories, they often don't use the same nicknames. But there you go. Class 14's easily my favourite diesel locomotive. I was very fortunate to see one at the Kent and East Sussex Diesel Gala a few years ago, and ever since then I wanted one. However, they're £150 to £200 new, and £80 to £100 second hand. I picked this up middle of the year for £55. I don't know why it went so cheaply. It's an excellent runner. Really, really nice runner. And in excellent condition. And it's a factory weathered one. So I've no idea why such a wonderful loco went for such a great deal less. But it did mean I was able to add... This was probably one of my, must-have locomotives, really. So it's easily up there. I couldn't quite decide whether to do it at number 2 or number 3. But I decided to put it in at number 3. But it's up there easily in my top 5 and always will be. So this collection will vary as I buy a few more locos, because as I spoke to somebody the other day who was new to model railways and said, buying locomotives is addictive. So we know we're going to buy a few more. This will always be in the top 3, purely because it's my favourite class of diesel locomotive in real life, and it's such a wonderful model. And there we go. What a great looking locomotive. And it looks wonderful on that layout, doesn't it? So we come to number 2, and this is another Kato locomotive. This is a C11 steam locomotive. So I know people know I'm a big diesel and electric fan, so might be surprised to see a steam locomotive, but I do like steam locomotives. However, I found them in Engage to be not really very, very satisfactory. I went through a lot of Graham Farish and things like that. I had a couple of BFE J94s, awful runners. This one is, of course, Kato. So it's not an awful runner. Just look at that movement. Look at the detail on that. And that, for me, again, it just looks wonderful. Running up and down layouts, pulling quite large consists. I like the smoke deflectors on it. It's just a great looking locomotive. It's a 264, so it's a little bit unusual. It does occasionally derail on the bogie trucks. But that seems to be common on all bogied steam locomotives, regardless of what points you run. But it is just a great locomotive. I've had some wonderful evenings just sitting and watching that shunting, which I would do quite happily. I have only got a coupling on one end, because I tend to run Inglenooks, so it doesn't really matter. And when I do get my big layout built, it's going to look wonderful just running around. So in at number 2, the Kato C11 steam locomotive. So at number 1, which won't be a great surprise to anybody that follows my channel, is the Kato steeple cab electronic locos. You just can't go wrong with these. So I think I own them in most colours. And why do I think they're so great? Well, firstly, have a look at them. I'm just going to try and zoom in a little bit there. Really, really smart, handsome looking locomotives. They're based on a Japanese locomotive, but when you look around, I've found images of very, very similar locomotives in most countries. Yes, some of them tend to be bogies. Some of them are different sizes, but centre cab steeple locomotives are very common. And these are just very handsome locomotives. They're wonderful runners. They will run very, very slowly and happily over points. And the reason for that is they're effectively all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup, and they have flywheels. I find it very difficult when people tell me that certain very expensive short wheelbase locomotives can't be expected to run slowly over points because they're short wheelbase. Well, these are phenomenally short wheelbase. but they run over points fine because they've got all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup and flywheels. So other manufacturers take note. They might like to take note of the fact that these locomotives cost under £50. In fact, when I bought most of mine, they were under £40. That's been a price increase like all things. It's cheaper to buy the freelance ones than the ones with, if you like, actual markings. That's the UK one. There's a rather nice German DB one. I think a bit like Lima with their, strange enough, centre cab diesels back in the 70s. I think they did them for a lot of markets. There's an American one. The orange American one was the first one I got. I got into these because I bought one cheap because it was only 26 quid. Doug managed to change the couplings for me and we away. While we're on couplings, these locos are very robust. I've dropped quite a few. However, when you drop them, sorry, these fingers have arthritis, so they tend to drop things. When you drop them, the couplings break. And they're not the easiest things to get back on. And they have tiny little springs, without which they don't work properly. So I am waiting to get some replacement springs. And for Doug to come home, he's got slightly more nimble fingers. But that's the only fault with them. They will pull a really good load. I've had them pulling sort of 10 wagons or so. And when I get my big layout, we'll see how much more they will do. But they are just the most wonderful shunters. Occasionally one runs a little bit quicker forwards than backwards. But this one's constant. So where I'm using our budget model railway controller, I can just set the speed and move them backwards and forwards on the switch. I just don't see how you can fault them at the price they are. I recently picked up this set for £37 second hand on eBay, including carriage. Do shop around if you're inspired by these. Some of the big retailers are being very naughty at the moment. Some of the private sellers or sellers on eBay are being beyond naughty and trying to get 60 or 70 quid for these. £50 the most you should be paying. And that's for the set with 2 other wagons. So some of them, like the UK one, come on their own. They will cost you about £40 odd, £45 without any wagons. But the sets come with these 2 wagons. A bit difficult to see in this, bear with me. So they come with 2 wagons. They come with a brake. They've got actual Japanese names, sorry, I don't know them. Which I have just put a covered body on there and weathered. And they come with an open wagon, which again, you can weather quite nicely. You can add logs to, you can add tarpaulins to. These are some of the nicest running locomotives, wagons I own. They're metal wheels. They will even run round the minimum radius. That's less than a foot. I think it's about a 9.5 inch radius. And they will run round it. So not only do you get a great locomotive when you buy them, you get some great wagons as well. So that's why they're number one, because they're superb runners. They're a very handsome looking locomotive. I have weathered a few and they're ridiculously cheap. There's no other way of talking about them. Every other brand, when they do a budget locomotive, Hornby and so on, it's a budget locomotive. It doesn't run well. These do. So you get a great running loco for very little money. So there we go. Those are my 5 favourite locomotives in N-Gauge. Pretty eclectic. 4 out of the 5 are Kato. No great surprise there. You can't really beat Kato. Yes, I would like to have done more British, but I find that a lot of the manufacturers are very expensive, not that reliable. I am beginning to tinker with the US, and I've got some quite nice US locos. But of what I own at the moment, they're my 5 favourite locomotives. Be very interested to hear your views. Always pleased to hear locomotives you think might be worth looking at. But please don't tell me that a £200... you know, 1 or 2 of these, I forgot to say on the Japanese C11, that did cost me, again, just under £100. That I only own the 2 locos like that, and I'm really not looking to buy any more. So if you want to tell me to buy new locos, bear in mind that all the time I can get superb locos like that from Kato for under £70, I'm not going to start buying £150, £200 locos to do the same thing. So there we go. They're my 5 favourite. I'm sure you'll have your own. But I thought people would be interested to see a little bit about my locomotive roster. Thanks as always for watching, and speak to you again soon.